All right, we're live. Welcome. We have our
Hello.
guest here. And Mark, go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone here
Sure.
and what you do.
I am Mark Seifter, and I am the director of game design at Roll for Combat. But previously, I was the design manager at Paizo, one of the four leads on Pathfinder's second edition, and worked on creating Starfinder and just a lot of stuff at Paizo. Has my name on it somewhere.
That's
So that's me.
exciting. Yeah, and so for the first part of the show, we tend to just kind of BS around for about like 15 to 30 minutes just so people can hop into the chat or, what have you. So you did work on some stuff from Dark Archive. So
Sure.
what did you
You
work
can you can
on?
see my name on the cover there with
Yeah,
James
it's true.
Case and Michael Raccoon.
So what did you work on overall in Dark Archive?
Oh, I had my fingers on like almost everything at some point except for like some of the intros and adventures. But in terms of what I wrote myself, the main thing that you might know is the thaumaturge class.
Yes, I do know, and it's a very fun class, and it has gone down on the channel's history of being the longest video I've ever done a sneak peek of a
Well,
small
there's a lot of options.
biothaumaturge. Yeah, there is. And that's something I noticed a lot with Dark Archive that I really enjoyed was you guys put a ton of flexibility in playstyle choices in these classes, and even some of the archetypes are a lot more focused on like roleplay decision making and making very cool choices. I don't know if you saw it today, Alex, but Living Vessel just came out, and Living Vessel is a really fun one.
I saw that you posted the video. Sadly, I've been running around too much to watch it. But Living Vessel was like one of the archetypes from that book that I was like I'm sold. Like I love that. I love that idea so much.
Yes, and
Who would
also
not want to be a living vessel?
I know, right?
that's true. They
Well,
get some
according
really
to the
good
flavor
feats.
text, most likely not the character. Might be
Well,
the
yeah.
case.
Oh, I mean, it's great, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Shay Snow wrote Living Vessel and did a very good job with Living Vessel.
Yes. I spoke to him a little bit at PaizoCon too, and he seemed very excited for it. So I'm very. It was a
Yeah,
really fun
they were
one to
they are
do.
very excited for Dark Archive. I know. I've seen them tweeting about it as well.
And the art is so good. Literally, the thumbnail I put up is just look at the art because I think it very much embodies what Living Vessel's for.
It does, and you can see it's from the ritualist archetype. It's the ritualist who has now decided to upgrade the ritualism to a further ritual level.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe even going a little too far, but
I
that's the fun
mean,
of it.
can you go too far into putting strange entities within you? I don't think so. I mean, come on, the elemental avatar from upcoming Eldamon book is gonna be like, "You're cool, living vessel. High five. We have all got creatures living inside of us, right?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, totally. I got cute, I got cute little battle monsters, and you have that screeching blob in the corner.
It's all a big eldritch family."
Yeah, exactly. It's very cool, and I also like the fact that they kind of mixed it with Pact Binder a bit. I got to read Pact Binder today in prep for the next video, and the fact that you can make a pact with the entity inside of you as well for more special benefits
Yep.
is very cool.
Yep, I wrote Pact Binder as a way to put some of the Pact feats from the Thaumaturge playtest that I had written into a different place. Partially because
Oh,
it was getting difficult
putting
convincing
everything
people
into
to
it.
give the thaumaturge the number of pages it needed, but it was easier
Yeah.
to get those pages in a different section.
That's fair.
Actually, just on that, I am curious. How often does that come up in like a design process for a book that you write some rules for something, you love it too much, you can't just like kill it off in the editing process, so you design a whole new thing just to put those rules in?
Not that often. The thaumaturge was a very unusual situation because every other class that has been over, such as the APG even had several, has always gotten the space it needed to like be given to it in order so that it would not need to be cut. Like I think Oracle and Witch were both over expectations, for example, and Summoner and Magus, I think, might have been in Secrets of Magic, although, like, we did copy fit. We managed to fit it by getting some extra space. Thaumaturge is the first class that the person who wrote it was leaving the company at the time that was happening exactly. Like, a lot of classes have been written by people who have since left, right? But I was leaving Paizo. So, between that and other things, it was the first class that actually lost pages and lost content instead of like always cutting from somewhere else instead of the class.
Oh.
So not very often, but it'll sometimes happen. And with Packbinder, that made it so it didn't lose quite as much. But if you played the playtest, you might have seen that it had for example, descriptions, more flavorful descriptions of the 9 implements and their symbolism and how it was connected to, like, in Golarian symbolism from, like, astrology and things like that. And some of that, for example, got cut.
Wow. That's kind of sad because, like, the one thing I think I crave a lot in these books is making Golarion seem more than just your typical high fantasy world kind of stuff, and so more on like individual lores and tidbits. I'm always very hungry for. That's why I'm very excited about. Well, I was very excited for the Mwangi book because that was a really good book, and then the Impossible Lands book that's coming up here soon. I'm also very, very excited for.
Yeah, the Possible Lens is going to be amazing. And Mwangi was amazing too. And I mean, Dark Archive is amazing. Everything that's coming out is great.
Yeah, Dark Archive is so good. The cryptid section.
James Case, as the design lead, just did a really good job of getting across the feel of that book.
It's like my favorite part about getting into Pathfinder, like this in these past like year or two, is every other game I've played. People on our channel know this, but I'm a big Warhammer fan. I play a lot of Warhammer, and it's really nice to have a game where every time a book comes out, I'm legitimately excited for the things it's adding, and not worried like, the things I really like are about to get ruined, or the fact that each book I feel like is always like topping the one that came before with like some new fun stuff. Each book always gives like, oh, I have like so many character ideas just coming out of this book just by reading the flavor text, reading through the archetypes, reading through the magic items and all that. It's a real like special thing I don't think I've ever experienced with any other game like I play.
I see what you mean, and it's definitely true. Like, even in games that I loved, like Pathfinder First Edition, I definitely had a feeling sometimes, especially in like very supplementary books that were coming out, that it was like, you know, what's going to be in here and is it going to be balanced? And sometimes it wasn't. But in Pathfinder Second Edition, it's just more about excitement about where it's going, and that's partially just because the game itself has more of a design standard for balance, whereas Pathfinder First was kind of about breaking the game in various different ways. That was sort of how you played it. That was how our group played it. We had certain limitations that we put on to prevent some of the worst problems, and then we took some of the very highest levels of optimization and made it be normal.
Yeah, that's actually such a good choice. And yeah, Pathfinder's been the design principles behind it is so tight and so nice that something like Thaumaturge or Psychic that comes out that really changes up the formula still has the same kind of balance. And while maybe pound for pound they can't do as much damage as other characters in their types, they offer something often better in return as far as flexibility or what they can add to the party. And for a game like Pathfinder that has such a strong strategy element to it, especially with the creature design, which is also really good, players who are not necessarily straight combat characters can still add a lot to an encounter. It's no longer just about beating hit points.
I mean, and the Thaumaturge and Psychic can still do pretty well on damage too. But if you want to have a class that is just like, well, point and click with damage, and it's higher, but it can't do much else, doesn't really make sense for that to be a class that you release like in a much later book for more advanced players who have all the books, because they probably want to look into a class with more options that as opposed to a class that has fewer options and is more simple in how it gets that damage, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. No, yeah, of course. And I very much I very much place myself in the advanced player category. And so that's why I always enjoy these, especially these later classes, especially because I find that the theory crafting for classes oftentimes does not hold against the actual practical use of classes. Magus has been my latest project, trying to get Magus to not only work well, but feel really, really good. And I see a lot of people who build Magus builds who are very focused on spell striking with their spell slots. And there's so many good spells in the game that are just augmented and perfect for Magus, like Blink Strike or Time Leap or Mantle of the Magma Heart and everything like that. To the point where I'm like, Magus honestly can use just cantrips for its spell strike if they really want to, and use the other spells for some bigger bonuses or mobility or, you know, everything like that. And I feel like that's where they really start feeling good, rather than trying to use Disintegrate Spell Strike over and over and over again.
Well, it takes all kinds, and that it definitely is even true in Pathfinder First Edition that doing a utility spell with spell combat in First Edition or doing a utility spell on your Magus in Second Edition have some really powerful options for sure.
Yeah, and it's just I don't know, I find that a lot of the classes, I don't really know how they work until you actually play them, because how you guys design the action economy and how the bonuses work overall, and just some of the utility of some of the spells. We were before the stream talking about one of the implements from Thaumaturge, which was the Regalia. And on the surface, it just looks like some stat bonuses to your charisma-based skill checks and being able to, you know, give better bonuses for Follow the Expert. But when you start breaking the system down and really getting to the nitty-gritty, being able to flat-foot enemies more easily makes your character very strong in a lot of ways. And so having a really high deception is a very powerful skill. Not only that, but Frightened is one of the best status afflictions in the game. And if you have a higher chance to crit because, you know, you have a high charisma and you're getting a circumstance bonus, and it's a circumstance bonus, so it stacks with things like item bonuses and status bonuses. It's like, if you do all the math and add it together, you can play these characters where the Thaumaturge literally just comes in and nerfs an enemy into the ground, and even if it's not a fighter, the Thaumaturge is still going to mess that creature up really, really good just by the pure pressure it can place on them with status debuffs and all that kind of stuff.
Sure, and that's even ignoring the benefits against enemy fear effects that are pretty substantial, and follow the expert, which is a very useful benefit to have, because follow the expert is very good for your party.
It is. And I think the exploration mode stuff, we do exploration mode just a little differently, but we have it like the dungeon crawl outside of combat is essentially our exploration mode, and so the players are moving through the dungeon using the rules, and so we use exploration mode a lot. But I feel like there's other games out there that kind of drop the ball when it comes to exploration mode, just because it's not like as prevalent in their games as it is when you have it like the way we do it. And so I feel like a lot of tables out there could use exploration mode a lot more for a lot of things, because follow the expert is such a good feature. I actually love it because it makes it where if you have every player who wants to make the same skill check, essentially, you could be like, okay, hey guys, how about we work together? And it makes your skill checks better, and it makes it easier to get through the event rather than just everyone blindly rolling, hoping someone gets the success on something.
Yeah, absolutely. And someone with Paragon Regalia who's an expert in something, when they follow you, you can give them the same bonus that you had, because you give them a +4. Plus, I mean, Paragon is Paragon, but it definitely does a lot. Like, allies in your aura don't get a bunch of, or get weaker conditions if you do not also have the conditions. Even the adept benefit gives a damage bonus that is pretty good, and especially if you're an accuracy marshal, because you don't need to be a damage marshal at that point. Then you have them in your martial aura to do accuracy, and then you have them, which is easier to activate because of your regalia, because you need to roll a diplomacy check to activate that stance. And then you're giving them damage from the adept benefit of regalia. So regalia is definitely good if you want to take the lead.
And I love the fact that the regalia, you're wielding like an ostentatious scepter, or maybe you have like your family's heraldry. There's so many fun ways you can skin it to make a very aesthetically interesting character that you just don't see with a lot of the other archetypes, because like the thaumaturge just gets to have something random in their hand and like, no, this actually provides great power, and everyone's like, yeah, sure, okay, I believe you, after they watch a mirror version of you shatter and splinter into someone's face. It's great.
Yep, absolutely.
The mirror one is so good too. But all right, well, we got a little bit more time. Alex, is there anything you wanna ask Mark, or anything else you just want to geek out about? Because I know you've been looking at some of the Dark Archive stuff as well.
Yeah, I think one thing that sets apart like Cam and I is he mentioned earlier that he's a very like advanced player. I'd call myself more of a casual player of these games. My focus is, I'm not a build guy. I don't like making builds. I like making a character and then getting abilities and such that I think fit the person more than just being effective. And that's what I really like about all these new books is each time it feels like there's some really cool new stuff each time that I can really use to customize a character, make them fully my own. And that's the thing that's so great about like all of this stuff, is each book adding way more options. Or my favorite situation of I've been flavoring an ability in such way, and then a book comes out, it's like, oh, you just gave me a mechanical benefit for the thing I've been doing. Cool.
Perfect.
And I'm gonna have to really delve into Dark Archive, because I've only had the chance to really like glance over a lot of the stuff I think's dope. Luckily this weekend I'm gonna have the chance to actually sit down and like read it. And there's some archetypes and that psychic class I'm just eyeing up, like that's the future character. And also
just be careful to make sure that you have enough candles, because if the light goes out while you're delving deep into Dark Archive, who knows what would happen.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And Thaumaturge I'll have to really dig into, because I think any like any class that the whole thing of making and exploiting a vulnerability, I think could make for a really fun like monster hunter / like Witcher type character. And I mean, I'm a giant Witcher fanboy, so anything I can do to like scratch that itch, like even better.
Yeah, it definitely matches with certain sort of like mystically investigating type people who are not like the investigator class, but they're searching around with weird magic and superstitions. A lot of urban fantasy characters cast spells in a way that's sort of more related to a thaumaturge than it is to like a wizard.
Yeah.
Yes. John Constantine's a really good example.
Love me some Constantine.
The Winchester brothers, everyone keeps bringing up every time thaumaturge gets brought up. Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely would do that kind of thing.
Yeah, Pathfinder's the only game system I've ever encountered where I homebrew something into the game to match for like a character, and like literally 6 months later, it just comes out in the game. We had a spirit barbarian goblin. I know, right? Reading our minds. I had a spirit goblin barbarian, and one of the things we had happen was her grandma became like a ghost companion for her. And then Book of the Dead comes out and they add ghost companions, and I'm like, well, awesome. I guess we were on the same page with that.
Yep.
So there was a lot of it happens all the time too. I'm just like, oh, this would be really good in this game. I homebrew it in, and then it comes out in the books and it's better, and I'm like, okay, well, thank you, I guess. Don't see my name in the credits anywhere.
It's just convergence of ideas of cool stuff. Like, when it comes to the Roll for Combat Kickstarter that's coming up, a lot of the like weird monster ancestries that we put in, there was at least someone who would be like, oh wow, I was also gonna homebrew that monster ancestry. So
yeah,
eventually if you do something that's popular, other people will like it too, I think. And other people will have that idea.
And I think this is also just a clear sign that people at Paizo and even obviously the third-party creators are very much play the games, because that's how I think these convergent ideas really come across, is just they play the game and they come up with the same ideas because similar situations happen.
Yep.
And a lot of other game systems, I feel, doesn't have that same feeling to it. And to be fair, it's usually because there's like a very small creative team for most tabletops. Something like Paizo or, Wizards of the Coast, they have very big teams compared to other tabletop genres. So they can pull from a lot of sources. But I feel like Paizo knocks it out of the park way more often than not, especially second edition. Second edition has been just the example I would give if you want to show a system that is so well designed that even though it's crunchy, it feels really smooth to play. Once you know the rules, it's a really easy game to actually play because the rules are all very clear, make sense, and there's not a lot of stuff just gumming up the works with random bits here and there.
Right. Yeah, I think was one of our design goals, is make it so you learn some of the core principles behind it and you can apply those and see how they apply everywhere else, because they work similarly rather than being super bespoke and you never know what the rules are going to be. And what about turn undead? Look up a table. It's different than everything else.
Yeah, that's true.
Let's not diss systems with really archaic, weird rules and tables that mean weird stuff. Let's not diss my favorite system too much.
I like random tables for like generating content. There's some fun on rolling on them, but I do not think that is a good system for people to learn. If you are in fact a casual gamer, then you must have experienced some pain points with systems that have archaic tables that no one can remember how they work.
I do for their sake.
I like to joke a lot on this channel. Like it is true. My favorite like tabletop system is a system called Anima Beyond Fantasy, because of how absolutely ridiculous and dumb that system is, where tables that links to tables that don't exist in the book, or rules that where you can just create literally any fictional character that has existed. You can create, like, oh yeah, I want to make Goku. Oh, super easy. Here's all of the ways to get all of Goku's abilities. It's over the top ridiculous and complete opposite, I'd say, just design quality from like Pathfinder 2e and the like, but
it has design like undisciplines is what it is. But Alex likes train wrecks.
I also am a big believer in the rule of cool always comes first. So if something is aesthetically interesting, I'm always immediately drawn to it, which is the big thing in like all of these books that come out, or all the third-party content we're just reading through or hearing, like, oh, here's just a thing you can do now, like a new archetype you made. It's like, oh, that sounds sick. Then I'm immediately drawn in if just the core concept behind it I find personally interesting, which, you know, it's more often than not with stuff made for 2e that I'm actually interested in it.
That makes sense. And for some people who are more casual but driven by rule of cool, like narrative style games that just have fewer rules altogether can sometimes be a good choice.
True.
Although sometimes it depends on like the way you psychologically feel about that, because sometimes if it is just anything, then it doesn't feel as weighty or as there as when the mechanics of the game actually explicitly let you do it. If you see, well, it just depends on the person, right?
Yeah.
Like some people for the Pathfinder 2nd Edition familiar system feel less like they can make a penguin familiar, even though you can make any familiar. It just says make any familiar. Than in 1st edition where it's like, well, here's the penguin stats, and you had to wait for that, or you couldn't actually make a penguin, and it tells you about its beak and like how high the charisma of a penguin is compared to another bird that isn't the penguin. So
I assume it's a little higher than most other birds.
You think because they're wearing their fancy tuxedo, so it should be
just like a little bit
better charisma because of that? Well, I mean, we can see because it's in there. So a penguin had a charisma of 7, a strength of 9, and a dexterity of 8, whereas a peafowl, who you might think also had a lot of charisma because of their, you know, very colorful feathers, has a charisma of 13. But only a strength of 7, so it's not as strong as a penguin. But its dexterity is 12, so it's much more dexterous. With a constitution of 10, the penguin definitely, with 13, has a better constitution. The peafowl's wisdom is 6. They are so unwise. Why are they not just dying out there with their -2 perception and no survival instincts whatsoever, whereas the penguin has +8 perception. It's got like 10 better. So, like that's all in the Pathfinder 1st Edition version, whereas like in 2nd Edition, it could be just like, oh, do you want a peafowl? Do you want a penguin? Sure, you could have either of those. One of them does not have 10 lower perception than the other.
All I'm hearing is that Pathfinder confirmed that penguins can body peafowls. So
I mean, the peafowl in PF1 did have better charisma though, and that's what we started looking at.
True.
They have much better charisma. Not that they used it for anything, but they did have better charisma.
An interesting delve into the psyche of tabletop players is just like, all right, let's talk about design principles. Oh, cool. Did you know in this system, penguins are less charismatic than peafowls, but could probably beat them in a fight? It's great. I love tabletop.
Yeah.
There's actually there's a tabletop game we played. I think it's called Forgotten Realm. I want to say
it's something. Forgotten is in the title.
And it was one I picked up at like a Comic-Con. I thought it was fun. We played a little bit of it. And they had a misprint in the book. And so the most valuable object in the book, more than an entire warship, more than a fleet of griffin mounts, was a hedgehog.
And
there
like,
you go.
By
the way, I do want to point out, while the peafowl has almost no perception, it would win in Pathfinder First because it had the weapon finesse. It had the weapon finesse feat.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Penguin didn't have it, and also had 8 dexterity. So its accuracy was 2 higher, and the Peafowl's 2 talons. I'm not sure like how it's fighting you such that its 2 talons are getting up in your business without it falling over, but it did have 2 talon attacks as the penguin only had 1 bite, which, while the penguin's 1 bite had a 1 in 3 chance of doing 2 of the Peafowl's 4 hit points in damage, the Peafowl making multiple attacks that only hit for 1, even though it needs to hit 5 times, it's probably going to win. It has a higher AC too because of its higher dex.
All right,
Why haven't I tried out Pathfinder First Edition so I can have this in-depth bird fighting?
Yeah,
like,
well,
rules?
don't worry. You
bird
can
fight mechanics.
You can learn all about the. If you haven't played it before, you can learn all about the action economy of First Edition, which is like, for those of us who have played it, we understand it so intrinsically, and it's beautiful to be able to understand it. But when I try to describe it to someone who hasn't played before, so you haven't played before, right?
The
Pathfinder
most I've
First
done
Edition?
is I've played Wrath of the Righteous.
Okay, but you've played Pathfinder Second Edition.
Yes.
So you know that it has 3 actions, and then a reaction, and then there's some free actions.
Yeah.
So in Pathfinder First Edition, it's not quite the same. It's a little closer to 5e and some of the other systems. So in First Edition, you have a standard action and a move action. And you can use that standard action often to like cast a spell or attack. And the move action you can also use to do some things that aren't moving. It's just called a move action, but it's not always for moving, but it can be for moving. You can combine the standard and the move action into a full round action. And, you know, some things like attacking multiple times or certain spells or other things like that required a full round action. Now, you can also move 5 feet on your turn, which is not any type of action, but not if you moved in any other way, including that stops you from moving in another way later if you take the 5-foot step. You also have a swift action, which you can use once per turn without it taking any of your other actions, but not if you've used an immediate action since your last turn, which you can use at any time, but then it stops you from using your next swift action. There's also free actions, just like in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and those are free. There's another action type called not an action, which is not an action, and you can use even if you can't use actions, and there's a variety of the actions that are not an action. Also, there's something called one full round, which is not the same as a full round action. Instead, it's a full round action that also lasts until your next turn, so it can be disrupted by enemies attacking you in between. However, if you don't have enough actions to spend the full round action for the one full round action, you could spend a standard action this turn and another standard action next turn, which is a bad deal overall, but you might need to if you've like been slowed or something in order to pull off the one full round action. And those are the actions in that is the basics of the action economy in Pathfinder First Edition. So I hope now you're ready to play.
You ready? We're gonna do bird fighting next week here on Table Talk using these rules.
You said action so much, I don't think I know what an action is anymore. And
well, some of them did not have the word action after them, so you kind of had to pretend. They just would say one full round, and you had to remember that it was not a full round action, but it was something else.
Cam, is this what I sound like when I'm describing like really weird game lore that I love? It's like.
But understand that if you actually play Pathfinder First Edition enough, it becomes second nature.
Oh, I can imagine.
It's a great game. It just like I remember there were people who were arguing in like some amount of faith, maybe bad faith. It's hard to say for sure that Pathfinder First Edition's action economy was much simpler than Pathfinder Second Edition's action economy. And I was like, listen, okay, there's a lot of ways you can compare them. There's ways Pathfinder First Edition was better. Pathfinder 2nd Edition was better, but I can tell you the Pathfinder 1st Edition's action economy was not simpler. You have kind of internalized it, like I have. But here is this is the shortest possible way to describe everything that a new player needs to know to be able to use it. And then I described it, and I was like, this is not like attempting to make fun of anything by exaggerating. This is literally what it is. And then they were like, yeah, maybe it is a little more complicated.
Yeah. a little.
Yeah, Jayaza, who was watching the stream, said it made total sense.
There's just certain breeds of people out there that they just understand the language, the old tongue of table talk or tabletops.
Isn't Pathfinder First Edition the game that has the grappling flowchart?
A lot of games do. it's a truism in RPGs that no matter what RPG you're playing, grappling is probably like the most complicated thing that's in it. Like Fate is a pretty simple system for like everything except grappling. Grappling's not that bad there. I think Pathfinder 2nd Edition finally managed to make grappling not like really complicated.
Is so clean.
It's complicated. Like every time I get a new game, I sometimes look to see how grappling is done because it's usually more complicated than anything else that exists in whatever that game is. But it certainly does have a grappling flowchart. It's hugely complicated, including some terminology about like sustaining the grapple, maintaining the grapple versus initiating it that even a lot of people, like I didn't know when I was hired at Paizo. I remember like my boss at the time, Jason Bowman, was like, do you have any questions about like the rules or stuff now that you're here? I was like, I really want to know about this grappling because I just don't understand about the maintaining versus not. And I asked certain questions and he told me, I was like, I did not know that at all. I think a lot of people don't. I actually made a video on the Arcane Mark channel, one of the earlier ones, where I put together some of those things that he told me that I didn't think a lot of people knew. And some people in the comments are like, that's wrong. It's like, well, Jason wrote grappling, so like he probably knows what it is, what he meant to say in the ambiguous wording.
Yeah, there's so many things that are like that in games that are like Pathfinder 2e is a watertight system in a lot of ways, but then there was the recent debates. Not recent, I guess when it first came out, it was the whole weapons with the trip or shove actions and whether finesse or agility apply to those actions you take with that weapon. Because it says you use the weapon to make the check, but it tells you in trip and shove and whatever what it actually does. Like what it takes from the weapon. Yeah, it's the use of
athletics. The problem was... it was a problem of getting the message, because during the playtest, there were a lot of people who pushed for rulings to people who were designers who were on the spot and usually did not work on the thing that they were ruling about. Mm-hmm. And rulings would be made wrong, especially in the Twitch channel. I eventually did an analysis that showed that if you asked a question with two options on the Twitch channel and put the designer in the hot seat with no rule in front of them, that our record was like 50-50.
Yeah.
Which you might think that's bad because you could flip a coin and get a record that's 50-50, but that's actually pretty good because people would only ask it if it was very confusing or if the answer might be something you didn't expect it to be, and then when the answer was given, they might give the answer you expect it to be. So if it's not the one out of the four people who actually has just worked on that section, that's a 75% chance you had the wrong designer on there. So in any case, there was a Facebook post.
Yes, the Facebook post.
Who incorrectly stated that a D20 check could be both an attack roll and a skill check at the same time, which it can't because of the way the game separates out your checks into either an attack roll or a skill check or a saving throw as being separate, and it would cause a lot of issues with things that work differently on attack rolls versus skill checks or saving throws. So that was cleared up in the errata.
Yeah, but the agile I think wasn't 100% because agile applies to
think agile actions. And other things like that are not as clear cut, but finesse was. Finesse was
100%. I've always ruled it as the weapon trait itself tells you exactly what the weapon adds, which is reach, and it applies its item bonus to the check, and that's it. It doesn't state anything beyond that. It's just the flavor text is you're using the weapon, but you're not actually making an attack with the weapon. It just lets you use a grapple with a hand that's technically full. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, I see the ambiguity on the things that are not finesse.
Like agile.
That's going to be up to your group. Yeah, that's going to be up to your group to decide. There's a reason people don't make adjudications on streams, and it's the reason I just said where it's usually wrong.
Yeah.
Without looking at the rules in question.
Well, that happens too. We'll be doing like we'll be doing something on stream and someone will correct me on stream, but like as GM, my job is to keep the game flowing and go. So sometimes I'll make on the spot decision that's wrong, but it's right because we didn't just go to the book and waste 3 minutes of our time to look up a rule that honestly was not very important anyway.
That makes sense.
You know, it's all about like, yeah, but that was one of the biggest things when it comes to like ambiguity in Pathfinder 2e. There's not a lot, but that one was one of the biggest ones that caused a lot of threads to be formed around.
I mean, the longer your game is, there's going to be a lot of ambiguity because language is fundamentally and inherently ambiguous. There is no such thing as a pure textual rules that are written and have only one like robotic interpretation, because the moment our brain is processing those words, we start putting our own spin and interpretation on it. So it's going to be different between different people.
Yeah, and Dead Phoenix mentioned it good. There's raw versus rules as intended versus rules as I have decided they work to benefit me. Yeah, that's the internet in a nutshell when it comes to rule
and
choice
really,
making.
There's not rules as written, because even that is a variety of intentions that are combined, and in some cases the rule is so simply written that all of those intentions are very close to, and interpretations are very close together enough that there can be a consensus, but there still isn't just one thing that is written, and that is the fundamental issue that you'll also see behind the idea, which I sort of mentioned before, about like, well, Jason is wrong about the grapple rules that he wrote, which is there's definitely some people who thinks that there is a magic or a soul or a sapience in the text that does not belong to the authors of, like, the designers of the text, where it can be like, well, you know, all of the people who wrote or work on this say that it doesn't work that way or isn't supposed to, but I think they're wrong because of my interpretation of the text, which I believe is the text quote as written. So like, it's about language, and fundamentally, I think now that we've gotten into whatever age we're in right now in the world, that's past the information age, people's disputes over how words are interpreted and what they mean create giant culture wars like outside of gaming. So of course they also create disputes like within a game setting too.
Yeah, and I mean, Dead Phoenix mentioned, does death of the author apply to TTRPG rules? Kind of, in the sense that the DM in the end is the final, you know, arbiter of the rules. And even I love Pathfinder 2e. I still change some of the rules in Pathfinder 2e to better suit our playstyle. Yeah, and anyone should. So if it all boils down to, you can read the rules, and as long as you understand the basic principles about what they're supposed to add to like balance and everything like that, feel free. And even if you don't, feel free, because, you know, no one can tell you how you can have fun.
Sure. And I think the death of the author could apply, but in that case, you need to apply it completely. You can't say death of the author. The author can't interpret this text and also say that the text is like this lurking mastermind, also author that the text itself is, that designates a single interpretation. If you apply death of the author, apply it all the way through. There is no single interpretation in that case. It's what the particular reader sees into it, thinks about it, and social contract with your group on how to work through it. The problem is when you have death, you try to do a partial thing where it's like, well, death of the authors, but not
for the part
other
I want. Yeah.
thing that's in the text that is sort of not being death of the author. I just don't want to listen to the author.
Yeah.
Picking and choosing what you like and don't like, rather than something consistent as the way you run your stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Because like the definition of death of the author, right, is that like the author does not have the right to give an official interpretation for what they wrote. They can just put it there, and your reaction and interpretation to it is the interpretation for you, and the way that people overall react and interpret to it. All of those multifarious ones are the work in essence, and they're all valid, equally valid. In fact, that's sort of that is the thesis of Death of the Authors. So you can't follow that while also thinking that the book has a hidden intrinsic truth that was not created by the author or anyone else, and is the only right way. So
Fair.
yeah, we got pretty philosophical here. Let's talk about Kickstarters. What do you
Yeah.
think?
I've been kind of waiting for about 20 minutes now to get started on the Kickstarter.
Yeah, me too.
This is par for the course for
This
for
is just
this
what we're
stream,
doing.
honestly.
We ramble, yeah. And
Yeah,
for
we-
Hachiken, just one more thing. Yeah, whenever someone mentions a ruling in the comments, I'll always check it like almost right away when I get a free moment. But sometimes there's so many rules, you just can't remember them all perfectly all the time.
Even the designers get some of the rules
all
wrong
the time.
that we wrote. I mean, in part because we sometimes have like play tested or written like 12 different versions, and we use the wrong version. But just like nobody gets it all right. Nobody's gonna come to your house and tell you, "You've got that rule wrong. Now we're going to send you to rule jail," or something like that, and we're burning all of your books.
Yeah, you can't use these right, so you don't get them. But hey, let's talk Eldamon, shall we? So, Mark, tell us what is Eldamon and what's it adding to the game?
Sure. So, to roll back a little bit, today is Thursday, the 21st of July when we're taping this, and on Tuesday, the 26th, a Kickstarter is coming out for Roll for Combat, the brand that is not exactly a company that I work for as the director of game design. And in that Kickstarter, we have three sort of big ideas / things that are in there. There's going to be Battle Zoo Bestiary Strange and Unusual with the 150 plus winners of the RPG Superstar Contest monsters, which are going to be super strange and unusual, plus crafting out of monster parts that you get from defeating the monster. Has an expansion in there, the Aberrant Soul archetype that lets you be someone who is turning into an aberration, and you have to decide if you're going to lean into that for power or not. I mean, if you don't want to turn into an aberration, maybe you don't do that. That's up to you. So that's the first one. Then there's Year of Monsters, which is basically the idea is to make 2023 maybe a little bit of a happier year than 2022 by putting something cool every month that you can get and engage with. And in this case, it's a monster ancestry for PF2 or race for 5e. And so what happens is every month you get one of the 12, 11 of which we have revealed at this point in time, being demons, gremlins, intelligent weapons. Yes, you can be an intelligent weapon. Dungeons expanded. Yes, you can be a dungeon. In fact, it's expanded because the original Dungeons is free and you can get it at battlezoo.com. Oni, nymphs, doppelgangers, minotaurs, slimes, Thenos, which are like a Medusa-kin, and mimics are the 11 that are revealed, and there's one that's still hidden. And so you get one of these each month. You get the Foundry and the PDF. And then we're going to have like a special stream for backers only where we talk about it with everybody and figure out how to expand it if we've earned extra paid space due to stretch goals. And then at the end of the year, there will be a compilation book that compiles them all and adds a whole bunch of extra stuff from stretch goals that are decided by you if you're part of Year of Monsters. So I've now said everything except Eldamon so that we can now answer your question by going into Eldamon. So the third one, and perhaps the one that has the most possibility for people who don't currently play Pathfinder 2nd Edition or tabletop RPGs to get interested, is Battlezoo Eldamon. So Eldamon are these sort of mysterious, ancient, and playful elemental creatures. And when I say elemental, I don't mean earth, fire, air, and water. I mean there are 10 elements at least, and up to 20 if we hit all of our stretch goals. And some of the stretch ones are like time and music and things like that. So they are themes for these Eldamon that are beyond what you might expect for elemental. And so the thing with Eldamon is they're a little bit out of phase with reality. So they often like to sort of meld into creatures or objects or locations, and they might poke out if they see something interesting, like you beat the monster they were in, or you pick up the flame tongue that a fire Eldamon was in, because we do have fire, earth, air, and water as well, to be clear. It's just not all. And so this allows you to insert Eldamon into the game in a way that is seamless and that does not require the GM to like change the entire campaign to be like, well, we're going to make it all about collecting badges and finding all the Eldamon. Or like, you don't have to do that. You can just run whatever you're going to run anyway, and people can find Eldamon. That's like the core design principle for it. So there's going to be at least 160, possibly up to 240 or so Eldamon of 10 to 20 elements. You can collect and befriend them so that they hang out with you. If you want, you can have them battle each other. And that they do kind of just for fun. They're sort of out of phase, so they don't like physically harm each other. They just, one of them is tired and de-energized because it loses that kind of phased out battle. If you have the Eldamon Trainer class, then you can switch your phase with your Eldamon. You phase out, the Eldamon phases in. You can think of it like, you know, in some games like Final Fantasy X, where like Yuna leaves and then her summon appears instead. So you can phase in your Eldamon and have it fight like ogres and dragons and everything else that you're fighting if you have the class. But if you don't have the class, you just are a barbarian or a wizard or something, you can still befriend as many Eldamon as you want. You just don't use them for fighting in that case. And you can train them, and you can have them evolve into a new form. So they typically hang out in what is sometimes called the pet form, that's kind of tiny and cute. But when they fight, they go into a battle form. They can switch back and forth at any time. When it's evolved, it replaces the battle form with the evolved form. And it still can turn into the cute pet form. So that's sort of what Eldamon are, and there's going to be a book about them with all sorts of stuff in it, and a card game that is coming out that will let you do an Eldamon battle super quickly. And since it's a card game that is sort of like not in any particular RPG system, if you are an Eldamon trainer and your friend, and you're playing Pathfinder and your friend is a 5e Eldamon trainer, and you're like, but whose Eldamon are the strongest? You can battle each other using the cards, even though you're in two different systems.
Oh, that's a really
That's
cool
a
idea.
lot. You guys got a lot coming
Oh yeah,
out.
there's also 6 plushies for some of the Eldamon, and
Yes.
and there's up to 10 miniatures. There's dice sets that are related. Each one is related to one of the deck themes, because I said there are 10 guaranteed elements, so we have 5 decks for the cards. It's not randomized. You get everything you need. You don't have to chase down rare cards or anything like that. But like Fire and Ice has Fire and Ice, right? And between those 5, which each have 2 elements, you get all 10 elements. And there's an associated dice set that's like a color that matches with that. Like there's a spring one and a summer one, and so on. So yeah, we're doing a lot of things. Never let it be said that Roll for Combat does not do a lot.
Yeah, you got. Oh, well, on top of this, you also have a podcast that you do for Roll for Combat as well, and you also have a live play, right?
So there is a YouTube channel, Roll for Combat Live, that I'm on with Steven Glicker, who is the publisher, and he does also layout and a bunch of other things. Steven also runs multiple actual plays, and that's what the podcast is the actual plays that he's running multiple of. And then, yeah, just all these products are a relatively new thing, but there was a Kickstarter that was out before that already has the first Battle Zoo Bestiary plus monster part crafting is in there. Then there's dragons, an ancestry book that I'm very proud of. My ancestry book. There's like 136 or so pages with one ancestry in it and 2 archetypes, and that's it. Like, some people would be like, is that a selling point that it only has that? And I say yes. Like, it doesn't try to like extend its welcome by like adding pages of spells that are about dragons, or like this is a banner that has a dragon on it or anything like that. It is all about playing dragons, and that is what it has. And then also an adventure path called Jewels of the Indigo Isles that became super long, just showing the scope of ambition that Steven has. Like, someone asked me on another channel, it's like, since it's kickstarted, does that give you an incentive to like do more, or since people already paid for it, would you not do that? I'm like, listen, Steven just does more anyway. Like, he expected to have like 60 to 70,000 words on the adventure, and which is in 3 parts, and then he expanded it until the point where one of the 3 parts is over 90,000 words on its own.
Jesus.
So, and he did not increase, well, I mean, you can't increase the price for the people who are already on the Kickstarter, so they just got a huge bargain. You can go to battlezoo.com or the link that was already just put into the chat, and that lets you see everything from the previous Kickstarter, which nowadays it's a lot of the discounted prices are still on there, but he finally realized that that book was going to split into 2 books and be a little longer than he thought.
Yeah, for sure. It's crazy, and I went to PaizoCon, and so Eldamon was announced there first of all, and Steven seems like such a fun guy, and he seems like such a guy who has such a passion for the tabletop industry in general. And I know one big part of Eldamon was he wanted to give something to the kids of tabletop nerds who, you know, want to get their kids involved, and Eldamon was very influenced by that. But I think there's also just a lot of fun to be had because the rules were designed so seamlessly that Eldamon are essentially loot items. You can view them as far as like a normal game is concerned, not without even taking the archetype or whatsoever.
I mean, sort of, yes, but it's also done in a way where the player can do everything if the GM is just like, I don't want to do this, you do it. And also, you do have to befriend them. You don't, like, you know, beat the stuffing out of them and then force them into servitude. You, like, I mean, you laugh, but that's what you do in, like, Pokemon.
Oh, yeah.
Even in Digimon, where your version is not one you attack, you murder, like, a bunch of them until you have enough data.
Yeah, it's something I haven't fully thought of. Like, yeah, that's completely true. Because, like, the big thing that interested me with Eldamon when it was described to me, because I first heard of it when Cam came back from PaizoCon and was just talking about all the cool stuff that was announced. And immediately I was like, I wish this was made when I was a kid. Because, like, this is all I wanted when I was young and playing Pokemon, like way too much. And even now, it's the thing of, like, if this was implemented in a Pathfinder game, I was in. Because it all around just sounds like really fun. And
yeah, our goal is to make it so that it's easy enough to bring in, so that if you want it, that the GM doesn't have to be like, well, I have to change my whole campaign to allow it, but can just say yes.
Yeah.
And
that's a good way to describe it.
We've made multiple design decisions to make sure that that will be possible. But that if you do want to have a GM who's just like, I love this is going to be a huge hallmark of the campaign, then it will reward that too. So you can kind of be as invested in it or uninvested as you want. And look, I get it. So, some GMs are going to be like kind of like the little cute monster, like, that's not your thing, right? You'd be like, nah, I don't like those. But you may still think that having 10 to 20 different, like, sets of elemental abilities is kind of cool. So we do have the elemental avatar class, which I alluded to earlier when we were talking about the living vessel. And sort of when I told you the story of Eldamon, I said they meld into things, right? So if they meld into an item and stay there for a while, it might become a relic with that kind of element as its seed. They meld into a creature that you're fighting. If the GM wants to, again, for all of these, over time, they might give, like, the creature, like, an Eldamon ability or something. You don't have to in either case. In fact, you can roll to see if the Eldamon was there afterwards and not even know until later on. But if an Eldamon melds into you, into your character, and stays there for a while, there's a chance that you might become an elemental avatar. And you start manifesting the powers of that element yourself by virtue of sort of attuning to your Eldamon. You use wisdom to sort of meditate and get in touch with your Eldamon rather than charisma to, like, befriend them. because you've just got one that's inside of you. And then, yeah, you know, you could use ice and like try to slow your enemies down with ice, or like burn them with fire and things like that. So it's sort of a different take on it that is definitely going to be fun if you do like Eldamon, but even if your GM just refuses to allow Eldamon, like if you want to use the elements, you can use them with Elemental Avatar.
That's cool. And Hodgkin asks, are you adding the uncommon or rare trait to these two? They're archetypes, or are they classes?
They're classes.
Okay, so are you adding them to these two classes?
We are not going to have them be uncommon or rare because of the fact that in a setting that has Eldamon in them at all, once you've sort of added them to your game, if they're in your multiverse, then they typically tend to be common is the default assumption. However, we're going to have sidebars because if you've bought our stuff, you know that we always put in sidebars because we're all about the idea that you are part of the design team for Roll for Combat, and you get to customize your game. You're going to work things out. So we always put in sidebars. Like when we made crafting with monster parts, we're like, but what if you want to do it with relics? Or what if you want to do it with automatic bonus progression? And so we're going to have sidebars in there being like, but what if you want Eldamon to exist, but like most people can't even see them, and they're invisible to most people in the world around them. And, you know, only a few people even know about them. And in that case, they would be uncommon or rare. So we're going to put in variants for people who have different setting assumptions about Eldamon. We're going to have a sort of a section about the setting as well.
It's cool. Yeah, the Battle Zoo books always look really, really cool. And the Dragon Ancestry book, you guys did a one-shot with them at PaizoCon. Was that right?
One of the characters, the one that...
one of them was. Okay.
No Net Ones was playing Vaughn, the iconic Indigo Dragon Cleric of Amon. From our... he's one of the iconics from that adventure, Duel of the Indigo Owls I mentioned. So I made a special, like, kind of prequel adventure where the iconics met each other at a sort of a bar hopping event. And by the end of it, they were invited by royalty to go do some kind of a thing with the treasure map, which is where you start the adventure path. So I made a little bit prequel adventure, and I ran it at PaizoCon. You can see it on the Roll for Combat live channel, and it is we had No Nat was playing the dragon, and Linda Zeiss Palmer, of course, the Queen of Leshies herself, was playing the Wildfire Leshy, and Vanessa Huskins was playing the Galtsugori Sprite, and then Stephen Glicker was playing the Gamayun, which is a parrot person pirate. So that's who we had.
Yeah, so if any of you want to check that out, you can go over to the Roll for Combat Twitch, right? Or is it on the YouTube?
It's YouTube.
YouTube, on the YouTube. And you can check out some of the fun material they had that was done in a live play if you want to see it in action. And I'm very excited for the Eldamon stuff. I think that's a really good direction. Something that, like, one, as being from the generation of kids who grew up with Pokemon and stuff like that.
Yay.
Yeah. It's definitely one of those things that, like, I've recently been playing a game on Steam called Monster Sanctuary, which is a really good Pokemon clone in a sense that I just spent, like, I don't know, 20 hours over the last few days just playing the game, and it's a lot of fun.
Game. It got that expansion with the Ancient World recently.
Yes.
I wouldn't really call it a Pokemon clone at all.
I wouldn't either.
I don't really see almost any similarity to Pokemon in terms of when you're looking at different monster training games and the genre. It probably has some of the least overlap with Pokemon because you've got multiple things out at the same time that are like synergizing and using your actions together. and like the weird, like the combo system and like the scoring and some of the stuff. Plus, the way you get an egg at the end randomly and make your own is a little more like Digimon than Pokemon, where you capture the ones you were fighting.
I mean, like, I agree, but I mean, in the basis of sense, it's got that same vein of you get monsters, you make a team of them. It just plays very, very different. It's very, very good.
Oh, sure.
And it just
I just object to the phrasing Pokemon clone to be used for anything that's in the genre.
No, that's fair. It's just an overgeneralization. But it reminded me.
Claim with I've been playing through Shin Megami Tensei 3.
Oh yeah,
really?
Yeah.
So, similarly, also playing a game where gotta befriend monsters and have them fight for you.
That game is so out there with some of the interactions with the monsters.
I love it.
It's great.
I love that series.
But yeah, and it reminded me just how much I really enjoy, collecting creatures, making teams, getting everything kind of paired together. And one of the things I say very constantly is that tabletop is, I think, in a really good position to start evolving in ways that people don't really know about, because tabletop is very different from the initial conception days of wargaming with a little bit more personal narrative thrown in. And I think tabletop's in a point now where we're gonna kind of get more of like the tabletop indie scene, where you get different styles of tabletop games people can enjoy, and people might like some over others, and that's fine. It's no longer gonna be a edition war. Like, do you prefer this game? If you have a tabletop game, it's the only tabletop game you can play. I really feel like there's gonna be a lot of outlets where people can play tabletop in a variety of ways, like they would a video game. And Eldamon, I think, is a good move in that direction, because it has a card game coming out with it, so you have that interaction, or because it exists in multiple systems as third-party content, you can create a community of people from both systems into its own Eldamon community to enjoy the game and have fun, and it can bleed seamlessly together. So I think everyone at the Roll for Combat, I guess company not company, is throwing together.
It is a company not company. It's a brand that makes another brand called Battlezoo. It's confusing.
Yeah. are really pushing the boundaries of, like, especially with all your D&D 5e and Pathfinder 2e integration stuff. I think that's perfect. I think that's a great way to allow people to enjoy things outside of their edition, their game, that they can have fun with. And I think tabletop needs a lot more of that out there. Just a lot of bleeding of communities together, even new games and integrations and stuff like that. And
well, I'm certainly really hoping that I think that when it comes to core players of tabletop RPGs, that Year of Monsters is going to be really popular, because it's got monsters they wanted to play. But I think Eldamon is the one that is closer to your utopian vision of being able to, like, overlap and bring in people that you never expected. That where you were talking about bleeding together different groups and melding them together in interesting ways. So, if anything, I'm hoping that Eldamon does that. I do fear that, like, you're never going to really be free of things like edition wars or... I mean, there's console wars. The problem is that people want to establish an in-group and an out-group and then create sort of parasocial attachments to... Not even parasocial, because, like, sometimes it's not to another person. It's to, like, a brand or a thing that becomes part of their identity, and therefore then anything you say about that whole topic becomes sort of a personal attack in a weird way. And it's just like, it is a natural thing. I know that companies that are exploitative try to create that on purpose and exploit the sympathy for brands from customers, and it is just a natural thing that people do. So we're never gonna see an end to it, I think, unfortunately.
No, I wasn't saying that, but I think it's kind of like video games in the sense that there are people who live and die by what game they made, and then there's just the grand majority of, I want to play a game for a little while, and then they do, and then they get done with it, and they're like, okay, that was fun. All right, this game looks like fun. And I kind of want for tabletop, I mean, like, having the big, long, grand adventures are always great and will always exist, no matter what happens to the genre in general. But I feel like kind of a more casualness that just allows more people to get into the hobby and to enjoy it in a variety of ways. And not only that, but just tabletop games that break the mold and kind of allow you to play the game in ways you couldn't imagine before. And that's kind of like, that's why I specify with like Eldamon, because Eldamon is very different from the standard tabletop experience in a lot of ways. And I think that's cool. And like I said, if Eldamon can make me feel like I did playing Monster Sanctuary, even if I only play it for like a little bit using those rules or whatever, I think that's a great addition to the genre as a whole.
Well, I hope it can. And I hope it gives you some of the same kind of feelings. Like, the idea is bringing in some of that joy and discovery of the collecting of these different creatures without like any of the like nasty stuff that is meant to try to exploit customers to get them to collect things by paying money. If you see what I mean. So like there's no microtransactions or like pay to chase after rare things, but it's more of a like, here's how in-game you can randomly see if you found a rare Eldamon. And so you get that excitement, but you don't have to pay your money for it.
Yeah, and
in that case, I am curious. Like, feel free to like deny the question if you're not at liberty to say. But are there, say, like very unique, legendary type Eldamon walking around that we can capture in the book? Like, can I roll around Galarian with a kind of like a Mewtwo style Eldamon?
Yeah, there aren't going to be any that are listed to be like, this is one of them and there's only one ever. But there are some, and so that makes it a little different than, like, literally Mewtwo is a mutation. There's only one. But there are definitely some that are extremely rare. And so that could be a story in itself, because how you distribute Eldamon, there's, like, several different ways to do it, and your group may use a blend of those. One of them is rolling on tables. And on those tables, like, the really rare one, is not going to come up very often. You're going to be like, oh my gosh, I got this super rare one. But that doesn't mean you have to use only the tables. Like, maybe you and your GM want to tell a story of someone who started at level 1 with a super rare one that you would normally like take many levels to find, and even then you couldn't be guaranteed. And like how people in the world interact to you, being like, you have this weird, ridiculous space Eldamon that is the space element that most people haven't even seen one of these particular Eldamon before, but you have it. Like, they may overestimate how powerful you are, or be like, how did you get that? And maybe part of your story too. So we definitely will. And there are also Eldamon that like have some variations on them, like minor variations on their visuals, or a little bit about how they work, that you could think of as like shiny Eldamon if you want, where you have a chance that it's a little more unusual than everybody else. Everybody else's Lotus Neck, because yours has a different flower on it, or it is sparkling, or something like that.
I can't wait to restart our D&D campaign repeatedly so I can get a shiny starter Eldamon.
There you go. Try to get a shiny Lotus Neck. Yeah, Lotus Neck with the S-N-E-K is our most common wood Eldamon. There's a little snake with a flower around its neck.
The art for Eldamon as well has been really good and very interesting, and something that kind of the unfortunate part is I'm just like, man, I kind of wish this was a video game, because I kind of want to play a game with some of the art from some of these Eldamon, because like everyone knows nowadays games like Pokemon are kind of getting a little unimaginative with some of their designs, and even Digimon got to that to some degree with some of their far out designs. So you guys, like, how big is the team working on like these projects?
You mean like the art? Like,
well, in general, just like, I mean, artists and writers and
artists, there are just a ton of artists that Steven will go to, although the base Eldamon art so far has been Firat Solhan, who also did every single interior dragon piece in the entire dragon book by himself. Yes, he is he's a machine. He really does, and he did also the border for the dragon book too, because he is multi-talented when it comes to art. But like when it comes to doing some of the art direction, we also had Eleanor Farron, who's a senior developer at Paizo, and also did a lot of the really cool art direction for the Lost Omens line. In terms of, I mean, she wasn't an art director or on the art team, but she did like art briefs that she sent to the art team at Paizo. But for us, we had her do more of a similar style thing, but we don't have a separate art team, so that is considered more of an art direction sort of role. But the core team is just me and Steven Glicker. So anyone else we bring in is a freelance, sort of for any particular situation where their talents are going to be really useful. Like in the adventure I mentioned before, Jewel of the Indigo Isles was written by 3 authors at Paizo who at the time were the 2 experts on adventure paths for Pathfinder at Paizo. Patrick Rini and Ron Lundeen, the senior developer and development manager who worked on, they were the main / only people who were working on Pathfinder 2 APs, and then Linda Zeiss Palmer, the development manager who's in charge of the digital adventures, and those were the 3 authors for the 3 parts. So we bring in freelancers who are writing things, but the only people who are like, my job right now when it comes to RPGs is working on this stuff, and that's it. And it's going to be me and Steven Glicker. I mean, Steven has a day job in tech, but...
Yeah, which means you both must be super busy organizing everything, and...
It's ridiculous.
Do you ever sleep?
Yeah, so we each have we're each a little bit different, and we both get a ton done. So Steven never sleeps. That's how he does it. So he'll send me something at like 1:30 a.m. my time, and I'm like, but Steven, this is 4:30 a.m. and I know you didn't go to sleep and then wake up because you also sent me something a couple hours ago. And he's like, yep. So he works for a number of hours that I could not work for, or my brain would be fried. In exchange, I work at an incredibly fast pace. I do a lot in the amount of time that I do work. And between that is why, if you go to battlezoo.com and get the free dungeon Ancestry, we released it on April Fool's because it was kind of seemed funny that it was a dungeon. He sent me funnily enough, at like 1 a.m. or something like that, or maybe it was 11 p.m., so it was 2 a.m. his time, on the 30th of March, being like, hey, let's do this for April Fool's. It was like 6,000 words, so I just wrote all of it on the 31st, and then he laid all of it out, and we had like a 2-hour video that we did on that day too, also, that was unrelated, and then we had it in time for for April Fool's. So yeah, we can work fast if necessary.
Damn, what?
Yeah, like recently, so I was very, very sick a few weeks ago. I got like a summer cold, and then it went back to back with COVID. It was a very unfortunate series of events. COVID was actually the least bothersome of the 2 sicknesses. But I was out for 2 weeks, and so I got better recently, about over a week ago, and I've been just on the content grind for getting stuff together to catch up. And then Dark Archive, I got the subscription stuff, so I've been hammering every day, and like, I can't imagine the workload that you both do, because I just reading, like, I read a class in a day, and then I spend the other half of the day digesting the material, and then I make the video, which takes another like 3-4 hours. That's about as much as I can do. This week has been really rough because I've never produced content at this kind of rate before. I've never did like daily videos before, and just so the audience knows, I'm not planning on doing daily content after Dark Archive. I'm going back to a normal schedule because we also do game reviews every month. We do new tabletop system every month to, you know, give our first impressions. We also do live plays, and then Alex and I have a special project we're working on in the background. And I just this week alone, just doing all the Dark Archive stuff back to back with archetypes, and the archetypes aren't big by any means. It takes me like 20 minutes to read through them, and then I spend a few hours digesting the content, just internalizing what it means so I can give a good video format for it. I can't imagine how much you or Steven do in a given day. It's an insane workload.
Well, I mean, I can't at least keep up with 6,000 words a day every day. That was a special situation. My steady state, if I'm not doing anything else, not any marketing, not any streams, but writing, is more like 2,000, 2,500 words a day. Which is still, I think, generally pretty fast. And that assumes that it's like, it requires design and other thinking too. Writing and then like designing the things I'm writing. So it's rules text. Even if you're not doing rules text, I know a lot of authors are more of a 1,000 words a day. That's sort of like Stephen King and several others did that many. But yeah, it just depends on what you do.
Yeah,
it's certainly faster than my writing time, my writing turnaround each day. It's a lot better than mine right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I know creative fields, people really underestimate, like when people think about what you do for YouTube, they're like, oh, you just record for 20 minutes and then you edit for a few hours. And it's like, no, I mean, if you're talking about like when the pen is the paper, sure, that's about how long it takes. But when you're talking about creating like the idea, concepting, and then as a content creator myself, like you said, like marketing and everything, I'm on Twitter, I'm trying to talk to people, get the channel's name out there, I'm interacting with the Discord, and it's a lot of work, and 2,000 words on top of, you know, like everything you do, even if it's just not consistently every day, but like a part of the schedule. That's a lot of content for creative writing. I know, like you said, there's some famous authors who write like half that and maybe even less.
But most do. Like Sanderson probably says he does like 2,000. So he's someone who does write 2,000 a day. He supposedly did like 13,000 when he was finishing A Rhythm of War on the very last day, which is, even to me, that's a lot. That's a lot of words.
Recently, someone was asking me, one of the biggest questions I always get are build ideas or builds for Pathfinder. Someone from Brazil who was very, very nice messaged me like, hey, can you make a cool tyrant build for me that does good damage? And I was like, sure, okay, why not? You were very nice and told me some information I needed, so it took me like a couple days to like piece all the feats together. I was also really busy making it because this was recent and I was doing Dark Archive stuff. And then I went and I wrote it down, and I think I wrote about like 2,000 words for like a step-by-step on what feats to take, what's the general play style based on what rules and everything like that. And like I could not have done that right on the spot if they had asked me. I had to take a good amount of time just thinking about it and figuring out what to do, because there's just a lot of rules in Pathfinder, and they also didn't want a boring build, of course. So it's like, one, this is me telling everyone right now, I'm not doing build. This person was very nice, and they corrected me on some information, so I figured I owed them at least a little something. I'm not gonna do build ideas for everyone who asks me. That's a lot of work, and it's it's hard to do so in a way that makes it feel like it's a very fun and personalized kind of build, because there's obviously the very consistent high damage kind of builds you can do easily for a lot of the classes, but to do one that has some narrative flair and theme to it can be a lot. And so yeah, I completely understand when you say like I'm doing this and that and everything, like, but I can't imagine like the sheer weight of the workload, especially because y'all have to organize everything, and you got competitions, and then you have to communicate with a team of, or not team, but like with various freelancers.
And for competition, there's judges, and to make sure the judges are judging and that they're gonna get that in time for the reveal and all of those kind of things.
Yeah, and it's that's a lot. It's a lot to keep people connected, and I'm sure you probably don't have many days off. Do you have any like days off? And what do you do on your days off?
I mean,
actually,
like, I technically do not have a limit on my number of days off, which is in general something that means that you work fewer, or you take fewer days off than when you have a certain number, because you want to use them before they expire. And I knew that going in, because I tended when I was at Paizo to just work and to also just keep working and watch as my days were going to go over, and then be upset because of the fact that I was kind of bleeding these extra days off. So I intentionally was like, yeah, I know that people take fewer days off when they have an unlimited number of days. It sort of doesn't seem like you would, right? Like, it seems like that is however many you want, but psychologically you do. And I was like, I'm okay with that, because I'd rather just not feel like I'm losing the days. So I mostly take off any day that the federal government gets off. I've already said in advance that I'm going to take off, because Paizo has all of those days as holidays, and Linda works there. So I'll be sure to be off at the same time that she is. If I need a vacation or something else like that, I can take off. I just don't usually do it. Yeah, this whole trip to Norway we're doing next week, we're going to be gone for a week, and I'm stressing, because as a YouTube content creator, you don't get a day off even when you have a vacation, because you just preload all that work into your prior weeks until you go. So after Dark Archive, which is already just videos back to back to back to back, which is already a lot for me, over the next couple weeks I'll be adding videos to my workload so that I get ahead of the curve, so that when I'm gone the channel doesn't have a week off, because the algorithm gets angry if you take a vacation. So yeah, that's it's something I can sympathize with. And I want to ask the people in the chat, if you have any questions for Mark related to the Kickstarter or not, who knows, please feel free to ask now. We're in the last like 30 minutes of Table Talk, so if you have any questions, now is the time to ask, and we'll try to get through, you know, any that may come up. We'll just keep BSing until the questions come up or whatever. But yeah, it's crazy that the idea that if you don't have specific days off, you just don't take as many off. And like, I feel that as people have done studies
well.
of it, and it's just true.
Yeah, you don't want to feel like you're losing anything. You don't want to feel like you're losing time.
That's right.
And that's, I don't know. I mean, I also kind of prefer this work style of, I work as my own boss essentially, and I do what I do when I feel like it, and I take a day off if I feel like I'm not feeling well or whatever. It's very nice. And not only that, but I'm working for something that I like. How long have you been doing like freelance work or design work in general as your primary job?
I mean, I worked at Paizo for almost 8 years before I joined Roll for Combat, and I joined Roll for Combat in late January, but I stuck around with Paizo for another overlapping month where I did a little bit with Paizo and finished things off that they needed me for, and I sort of did two jobs so that they didn't lose me immediately with the 2 weeks notice. They had like an extra month where I was sort of there and doing both. Part of that was that my vacation time, which I of course was at the cap, was paid out, but there was another kind of vacation I'd earned by working on weekends and things like that at conventions. That was comp time, and that is not paid out. So part of it was like, I'll stay and I'll help for an extra month, but I also am gonna take off like the time that otherwise would go away. So that was how I spent that time, and it worked out because it allowed me to help a lot with certain things they really needed me for during that extra month, and it allowed me to work 2 jobs without like breaking down that I was working 2 jobs because of the comp time.
That's really nice. That's actually a really smart way to do it. And
it gave both me, because I psychologically didn't want those hours to go away, and Paizo, because they wanted to have my expertise available. Both got things that we wanted, so it worked out.
Yeah,
sounds like a win-win.
So any other questions about the any of this content? For it looks like there's one in chat.
Yes.
Asking it asked what the class archetype for trainer class is like, and I assume they mean the multi-class archetype.
Yeah.
And we're not sure yet because I've not finished writing the class, so who knows? Presumably, or like we've said, at the very least, it's gonna let you use Eldamon like a single class trainer does, but obviously it's going to have to be a little bit weird because of the fact that none of the other classes are based around like phasing yourself out to phase something else in. So that sort of value proposition is a little bit tricky to handle in a multi-class, right? Because with your multi-class, you're mainly a champion, and you don't want to lose your champion. So we may have to consider how that's going to be done. And it may require a pretty interesting rework of how they work, because maybe you don't want to lose your champion. So maybe, and I'm just making this up here, we have no idea, but maybe instead of like FF10 where you phase out for like the summon, maybe you call it in and it does something once and then goes away with your multi-class, for example, because you don't want your champion to not be there. I mean, you're trying to do champion stuff.
Yeah, maybe you'll have actions where you can temporarily phase your Eldamon in to perform an action.
Do it, and then it goes away right away.
And then goes right, yeah.
Kind of like, the Beastmaster archetype, where you have a bunch of other animal companions, but they're not all on the field, but you can sort of like whistle and call one in to do its support benefit, and then it leaves right away. Could be something like that. That's one of the things I'm thinking of, at least.
Another question, have you come up with at least one Eldamon for each element yet, or will that come more so after the Kickstarter is done?
Have all 10 of the elements that are guaranteed to be in there have their common Eldamon. They absolutely do. So we do have those. So for fire, there's Squirrelash. I'm naming the pet form, but they also have other names. So it's Squirrelash, Squirrel Ember, Squirrel Lava. For water, it's Boto, the dolphin, water dolphin. For earth, it is Kitopaz, the earth cat. Air has Terrapoof, who is a air bat. Wood has that would be Lotus Neck, the flower snake. Ice has Chillot, which is an ice otter. Electricity has Towurtle, which is a electric turtle. Force has Potfox, which is a force fox. Life has Unkrub, which is a little grub of the life element. It turns into a beetle in its other forms. Then Death has Morpup, which is a death dog. And so those are the 10 elements that we're sure to have, and we already have at least those 10 in their battle and evolve form, which is 30 Eldamon, and we have a few more beyond that as well, such as, for example, if you've seen art of the Elemental Avatar iconic, he's got this rare wolf, ice wolf Eldamon as what is like sort of within him. And so we know a little bit more about that, but it's for now only been seen in art of the iconic character.
Yeah, and I'm right here on stream. I've pulled up the Battle Zoo Eldamon link that you got here in the chat, and here's some of the art for the Eldamon, some of the promotional stuff.
That's the avatar, and there's the avatar fighting against a monster, using his ice powers to freeze the monster.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's an image of the ice wolf. It doesn't look like it.
Maybe not, but some of the art with the avatar shows the wolf like in a storm or something like that. But there is the Eldamon trainer is facing an enemy Eldamon trainer and has used like the evolved otter against Lotus Snack's evolved form, Hydranther, which is a 3-headed Hydra snake with flowers on it.
And this is I think very much what the idea for the trainer in like actual tabletop looks like.
That's right. So you've got this Cadavalier, which is like an undead made of a knight and their horse combined, and is fighting against Botoshin, which is the evolved form of Boto, the dolphin. So yeah, that's actually a dolphin that's all the way evolved, and it's got legs and all these octopus hands back there.
Yeah, I was gonna ask which one that was, because that one looks awesome.
Yeah, some of the evolved forms are really great. I also really like the turtle's evolved form. It's pretty rad. But yeah, that's Botoshin. It's the evolved form of Boto. There's also Botorrent, which is the battle form that's kind of in between. It sort of develops scales as it's going, and is much more powerful in the evolved form, especially with the octopus hands in the back, which I guess we usually say are tentacles, but are apparently biologically not. It's confusing.
That does sound confusing. Well, if there's any other questions, everyone can feel free to ask. We always, we got Mark here for a very special time here, and oh man, a lot of people joined recently. Alex, I don't know, do you got anything to add?
Yeah, I am curious. How does evolving an Eldamon work? Does it evolve like alongside your character, or is it a separate own little thing for them to like evolve and get stronger?
So, in order to evolve and even to befriend an Eldamon, you need to understand that Eldamon, and leveling up is going to be a part of it, but that's not everything. You get to know them more, you understand what they're like, and that will help them evolve into their final form. And so each one, it might be a little bit of a different process, so that it adds to the roleplay a little bit. So, for example, Squirrelash is the Fire Squirrel Eldamon, and the Squirrelash loves collecting things. So you might help Squirrelash like complete a collection or do something related to that as part of the process of evolving. Also get to a certain level. Whereas Lotus Snack likes to kind of meditate and also loves things that are found in threes or triplets. So kind of like the Thaumaturge in some ways, likes things to be in threes. So if Lotus Snack meditates on the meaning of 3 with you, then it can split up and have 3 heads and become an evolved Hydranther. So there's a little bit of roleplay that goes into it, and obviously, like, if your group is super not into role-playing with you, and your GM is like, yeah, we're not interested, we don't want to hear it, just do it yourself, then you can kind of sideline it, or do it in your head, or just kind of, like, briefly describe it in a one sentence, like, I play with my, Chillot and tell it a lot of ghost stories, and I want to go research ghost stories during downtime because Chillot loves ghost stories. Whereas if your group is into it, you can have a lot of role play involved around it. You just kind of use it as much as you want to. It's a story hook. And Dead Phoenix says increase social links with your Eldamon, and it's like, yeah, kind of leveling up and make sure you have your social links. Hey, Dead Phoenix, if you like social links with people. I created a system which I guess is in 5e and PF1. It hasn't been converted to PF2 yet because I've been busy. That is in a book called Ultimate Relationships that is pretty social linky for tabletop RPGs too. Let's see. Ezekielu asks, any word on when we'll learn the last ancestry for Year of Ancestries? Like a day or two before the Kickstarter launch. I'm considering giving it out in one of the 2 interviews I'm in tomorrow. I'm thinking about it. So you'll have to watch those. Because I just gave the Mimic today on Reddit. So I don't want to give a second one on the same day.
But
it's getting so close to next Tuesday that I might just give the other one out the day afterwards. But yeah, the Mimic. I don't know if you've seen the art for the Mimic. You can find it on Reddit, but actually I can just copy the piece of art directly into this chat with you so you can see it. But it's hilarious.
Okay.
Oh, I love them.
I had to pull it up on my phone 1 second.
That is so good.
But yeah, I'm not going to say what the last ancestry is until probably tomorrow, but I might not do it tomorrow. It'll depend on my mood.
That's fair.
If you're feeling charitable.
Oh yeah, Dead Phoenix. Yes, Jade Regent is where I created that relationship system for the Jade Regent Adventure Path myself, because I wanted to use it instead of the one that was in the AP. So it even had some like relationship stats for the 4 main Jade Regent NPCs, as well as several other NPCs that showed up there with the serial numbers filed off, because that's what you do in a third-party system. But definitely, I think that the you might not be able to find the 4 main Jade Regent NPCs anymore, because it was in a line that had a name that got discontinued. Let's see. Ezekielu asks, what was your favorite part about making the Thaumaturge mark? What about the Inventor? What about the Swashbuckler? I don't know. I enjoy really getting into the fantasy and doing research in related media and trying to make a class that delivers what you actually want the class to be, to tell those stories. Because I can tell you, people in Pathfinder 1st edition joke about, like, nobody plays the Swashbuckler up to high levels. You just dip it because it gives an absurd amount of its power in the first level, but then you leave. I played one up to pretty high levels, and because I like Swashbucklers, but it didn't deliver my fantasy because it kept preventing me from doing the things I wanted to do. So that meant it was fun to reimagine the class very differently, and I wasn't sure if people would like it because I thought people might be tied to the 1st edition version, but in a way that would instead encourage me to do the things that I already wanted to do with my character, where I'm swinging around on chandeliers and doing skillsy stuff, rather than just like, no, my Swashbuckler stands in one place and attacks you and is basically invincible while doing it. That meant your melee attacks, but that's not exactly the Swashbuckler. That's more of like, I don't know, is that the archetype of the maybe that the Drunken Master, where it's like, oh, you don't know, I'm dodging and weaving and I'm gonna counterattack against you.
Well, mission accomplished, and I didn't know you designed the Swashbuckler, because Swashbuckler is like one of my favorite classes to play in 2e. It is such a fun time because I want the same thing. I want to be swinging around, quipping at the enemies, like all that stuff, and it is immense fun, like, to play that class.
Yeah, I mean, all the designers, as many as possible, take a look at the class and give comments and help do passes, but I took the lead on Thaumaturge, Inventor, Swashbuckler, Bard, Barbarian, Champion, some amount of Druid, although Jason Bowman did a little bit more of it, but he didn't quite finish the lead, so it was kind of like a splitsies. And then all 4 of us worked on the Core 4 Fighter, Rogue, Cleric, and Wizard, kind of like in a vertical slice where it's like, I did these 5 levels, you do these 5 levels. So I worked on a lot of classes for Pathfinder 2nd edition.
That's so
So
cool.
far, I've done the most classes, but if we're talking about Paizo classes, I'm guessing that Logan's gonna catch up to me pretty soon.
That's very, very cool. And I didn't find the art. What chat was that art put into?
I
It's
put
in
it
the,
into the
in
chat
our,
on your Discord.
yeah, it's in our voice call, the voice call chat.
The VC chat?
Yeah, because there's when you go to like the channel we're in, there's an open chat button. And you hover over
Oh,
it.
that one. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
I
in that.
remember they added that feature. Oh, that mimic does look cool. Okay.
Yeah, it's cool.
I love the tongue shield. That's
Yeah,
fun.
it says shield. It's not exactly its tongue, but it's like the same color as its tongue.
Or, yeah, like it's tentacle. But, yeah. That's
Yeah.
interesting. It's pseudopod.
Yes, little
Um,
pseudopods.
that's very, very cool. And yeah, there's also. So what's the Ezekiel asks, what's the fantasy, I guess, for the trainer and the elemental avatar?
So the Eldamon trainer fantasy is, I'm someone who's gonna travel across the land, looking for different Eldamon and befriending them, and understanding them more, and collect a bunch of Eldamon, train them up, evolve them, and use them in battle. And the class fantasy of elemental avatars, rather than being friends with them as much like Eldamon trainer, you're more of meditating and understanding the elemental creature that is within you and the weird elemental abilities that you can manifest from that. So it's a little closer to like an Avatar The Last Airbender than a Pokemon vibe from it, although maybe more like talking to the lion turtle to learn more about like spirit bending or one of those kind of things where you kind of have to meditate as opposed to just like, well, we'll just learn about water by shooting out water or something like that. So that's sort of where the class fantasy comes from. There is like, there's something within you, and it makes you different. It makes you special, and you can get in touch with it through meditation and through your wisdom, rather than like making friends in the outside world. You have a vibrant inner world, and that also gives you strange powers. And where the Eldamon trainer might just have like, I don't know, 50 Eldamon at some point, and you have a few that you're ready to phase in at any given time, and is a little bit more versatile in that way. The elemental avatar has more depth in their element, and you might reach a point where you transcended what that element could mean. So what do I mean by transcend? Well, suppose you're cold, like the iconic, right? Imagine, if you will, that so you're given sort of two options. You can either get some like more stuff with cold, or the cooler one, which is get stuff that is out of one other element by flavoring it, that you were able to do it with your main element, and it actually becomes from your main element. So for example, suppose that you were so cold that you can freeze time in an area. You just kind of slow down or freeze time itself, and so you got some of the time element abilities on your cold elemental avatar from that. Or maybe your character controls air in a way that like affects weather patterns, and can therefore like create water out of the air, and uses some water abilities based on that. So it gives you things that are from a different element, using your main element, because you've transcended what it means to be that element.
That's a super cool way of doing it.
So does it keep like the same traits in Pathfinder? Like you just use one of the water abilities, but it's like the air trait and it does bludgeoning damage, or
you've somehow made it become part of the water element at that point. But it would, so like if there's an air one that's like, and now you can fly, and you're like, yes, I'm doing it with water. I've or maybe let's say fire. It's like, well, I can control heat, and therefore, since I understand convection, I can change the airflow in the area and create buffeting air that lifts me up because of the heat and hot air and cold air, and so I'm now controlling air due to controlling fire.
Okay.
Dead Phoenix, it's actually very different from Kineticist, actually. Like, I wrote Kineticist for Pathfinder First Edition. It is a fun class, but it's this is about as far away from that as you can be while still being kind of about elements and not a spellcaster. So, whereas sort of, I kind of see it as an ideal that you could create an elemental party that has like an elemental sorcerer with the elementalist archetype from Secrets of Magic, while also having an Eldamon trainer and an elemental avatar and a kineticist maybe from one of the third-party kineticists that are out there already. And they're all going to bring something different to the table. Kineticists, for those of you who didn't play Pathfinder First Edition or didn't know my class from there, they, you can think of like 11 from Stranger Things, where it's like you're bleeding out of your nose because you're trying really hard. Kineticist is sort of that, or like Carrie or Firestarter from Stephen King. So you control some element, or telekinesis, which is the aether element, and you basically repeat the same thing off in a blast over and over, but you can do more if you're willing to burn yourself out. That's kineticist. Whereas elemental avatar is very different in that it's more rotational, where you're never going to repeat the same thing. You're going to use a bunch of different abilities and cycle through them. So it has a pretty different play style, I would say. But given that they're both not spellcasters and both involve something that is quote elemental, although the element choice is also very different for Eldamon, I would say that they're about as different as they can be in that scenario.
That sounds fair. All right. We're entering into like the last like 5 minutes of the of Table Talk. So is there any like final thoughts or anything else you want to give us, or anything where we could just BS until the end and let people ask some more questions? Your preference.
I mean, so I would definitely say, and we can then BS until the end after this, but check out the Kickstarter. It's going to go live on Tuesday. It's at the link that is earlier in the chat. But we're definitely really interested in seeing people check it out. There's a robust amount of possible stretch goals, and we only are showing the first ones for now, because also, like, if people are really excited about certain things on the stretch list, we may like alter the order or something like that. But I really want us to hit a lot of the stretch goals, and especially I want to do all 20 elements. So yeah, that's going to take a decent amount of stretch goals to get to all 20 elements. But I mean, you're not going to be able to freeze time if we don't have time. So
exactly. Yeah. I'm very excited about it personally. If I had a bit more financial wealth, I'd definitely be pitching in. But currently at a state of, especially not working for 2 weeks, our household has been a little destitute, but it's fine. We'll bounce back, hopefully.
I hope so.
Yeah, hopefully. But it is really, really cool. I was very excited to have you come on and talk about it, and very fun to participate in this whole event of getting ready for the Kickstarter. And just talking to you, Mark, I really enjoyed our conversations that we had at PaizoCon, and getting to share this now with everyone, that's always something I'm going to enjoy, having this up on the channel, as far as like, something people can come back and watch. And we have a pretty big Discord now. If anyone who hasn't been keeping track, we're now getting to about over 80 people on the Discord. So we definitely, a lot of this information is going to spread through there, and we got a lot of people joining all the time. And if anyone comes by or is currently watching, lurking in the channel, feel free, like, follow, subscribe on your platform of choice. We stream on both Twitch and YouTube, and we have a great Discord where all kinds of fun stuff is happening. And yeah, I was very excited to have this event, and especially it's a good break from my current workload, even though I'm still producing something for tomorrow as well. This is just a good way to just get away from the work and just chat and just have fun for a bit.
Right.
And yeah, well, we still got a few minutes here, but it's been such a pleasure. And I don't know, Alex, you got anything you want to add to this?
Just laying it on. It's super cool, like talking to you here. It's really fun to hear like a lot of stuff behind the game that I love to play. Like hearing about the design principles you bring to it, and just like the effort it put you all of you like put on to create either third party or like main stuff for the system. So it was awesome that to have you swing by, because all these conversations Cam had at PaizoCon, I was like, man, I wish I was there.
Yeah.
I wish I could have attended and like I talked to a lot of people, but hey, I can at least do it at some point like now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you know, it's such a bizarre situation of getting to talk to someone who's designed like some of your favorite classes. I think it's just, in most industries, something like that is very hard to do in general. Paizo's pretty open. I find Paizo's pretty accepting of like anyone just walking up, and Paizo employees were just at PaizoCon walking around, chatting, talking. I talked to quite a few of them myself, and it's such a surreal feeling to actually get to talk to someone who designed a lot of it and was the mind behind a game you really, really like. And Pathfinder 2E is my favorite game, so like it's been such a pleasure, and with all the content you're bringing out, I can't wait to see what you do in the future. I'm sure it's going to be nuts. It's going to be insane, just because of all the work you've been putting in and just how well you've kind of synthesized down the tabletop experience, I think, into your design principles, where it's not all about just generating big damage numbers. It's about making all the systems work together so that even a character who's very charismatic can be very efficient in combat if they so choose, and vice versa with like the Thaumaturge, and how the Thaumaturge can do some really good consistent damage despite being charisma focused, allowing them to do a lot of other things and recall knowledge on top of everything, with their either the fact that because the Thaumaturge gets access to the training proficiencies for the knowledge-based proficiencies as they level up, and esoterica lore, like the Thaumaturge just comes with such a big goodie bag of things they can bring to the game more than just combat, that it's probably gonna be one of my favorite classes. Investigator is my favorite class, and this is essentially the supernatural investigator, so it's gonna probably be like my second favorite class.
And you know, it's definitely not easy to write a tabletop RPG, or really a lot of games that are both very asymmetrical about what characters do, and where everything that you're doing, like you said, and not just damage, is important. It's tough. Like, people knew there were some imbalances in Pathfinder First Edition in that regard, but some people felt like they were like, you know, these spellcaster builds that just automatically win at the beginning, the reason that they're balanced from these other builds is we should buff everything to be as strong as the most broken thing. And the problem with that is it wouldn't have produced the thing that you liked. Because as long as there is a degenerate strategy where you just win, then it's never the right move to bring like support or healing or defense or anything like that, because the best strategy is to degenerately win right at the beginning, and that's always safer than trying to mitigate the threats that you take later on by just end it. So you have to actually build a system that tamps down on the ability to just auto win if you want all of the different play styles to become important. And that's the way we went in Pathfinder 2nd Edition.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I've had such good encounters in my games because of how the balance is. Like, I've been doing tabletop for a really long time, so when Pathfinder 2nd Edition came along and the design discipline was so really well done, I was able to pretty early on, like within my first few months, start designing encounters where I could estimate about where the players would end as far as like resource expenditure, HP expenditure, everything like that. And I love it because in other games like Anima we talked about earlier, it's really hard for me to tell because sometimes the players are so stupid strong that I can't throw anything at them that's a threat, and sometimes the player just made bad character choices and now a moderate threat is actually dangerous to them. That's just how varied the game can be. And Pathfinder, it doesn't really matter. I have players that range in experience from a decade to less than a year in the same campaign, and the combat is always exactly where I expect it to be. No one is really feeling like they're getting stomped really early. No one is feeling like they're doing a lot more. Everyone feels like they're adding something to it. And it's such a good feeling that when you can make a combat that is very threatening to the players, knowing they're gonna win, because that's the point. Like, the players are supposed to overcome adversity, and if you can create a sense that they are doing so just because of how tight the numbers are, you can be like, I knew you would win by not a lot of hit points, but I knew you would win. That's such a good design for the game. And of course, there's all kinds of situations, and luck can play a factor as well. But Pathfinder's numbers are pretty tight, and you can make a scenario what you want it to be. If you want the players to be challenged, easy. If you want it to be easy, well, I mean, simple. And you can, with all the different things monsters can do, especially late game monsters. I've never seen a tabletop game that gets more interesting the higher level you get with how the monster encounters go. Because like in D&D 5e, endgame encounters kind of become easy because of how broken the players can be sometimes. And a lot of the monsters just really can't compete. In Pathfinder, some of the endgame monsters are just nuts. Endgame, like Linorms, are very fun. Even killing them is dangerous. And all kinds of different monsters. It's just very fun. But anyway, that's my little end thought there. It's been a pleasure, Mark, and thank you to the chat for coming in and asking some questions, keeping things going. I hope everyone enjoys, and if you're watching this, after the fact, be on the lookout for the Kickstarter coming up next week on the 26th. And yeah, I don't know, anyone else got any final thoughts before we say goodbye?
That's it for me. Thanks for having me on the show.
Okay. All right, well, I guess we're going to go ahead and say goodnight.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.